Third episode in a row. There you go. Your mic cut out again. That's
I'm gonna
hysterical.
reduce. I'm gonna reduce the volume on the mic.
I don't
Maybe
know
that'll
if you're
help.
yelling into it or
No,
what, but
I
yeah,
was
no,
barely talking.
that's funny because you start going. So there you go, listener. Third episode in a row. We have to start the stab all over again. So Zig, take it away.
Amazing. This is what was missing from the dig at Giza. This is how they controlled it. It took us 15 years and 3 supercomputers to MacGyver a system for the gate on Earth. Look how small it is.
Funny. Welcome to episode 245 of Nerdery Murdery.
Big 245. I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Jeffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows, the ups and downs, the good and the bad, the nerd and the murd. In between recording episodes, we've talked about that before. You know, we record 3 on any given Sunday we're recording. I'm sitting downstairs trying to figure out how to get Chelsea's Bluetooth headset connected up to our TV, and damned if I can't fucking figure it out. I got to sit here and toy with it afterwards. I told her, I said, I got to go. I got to go finish recording. I'll deal with this later. Technology.
And while that was going on, I was chasing down a dog in my house.
Yeah.
Who was up at the corner gas station just having a hell of a time, getting treats and pets.
That's hysterical. All right. Well, why don't you take us away over to the nerdery side of the house?
Today, we're going to talk about Stargate SG-1.
So I want to preface this before we jump into this. Are you talking about the movie at all?
No.
Okay.
I'll do that separately.
So the movie I've seen,
Mhm.
the TV series I have not. When I saw this episode coming up, I decided, you know what, it's about time that I step into that. I'm going to start watching it, and I can keep it going. So I tried watching it, and I think I caught it on Prime.
Mhm.
I'm almost positive. The sound is so low, I
Mhm.
could not get it loud enough to sit with it. I got through the whole opening sequence, and the sound was just so low, I had to dump out. So this is all you. I'm familiar with it. I know what the things that happen in it, and I'm familiar with the characters. I just am not going to have a whole lot to give on this one because I tried, and if I can't hear it, I'm not going to watch it. So anyway, there you go. That's
Thanks,
how it
sir.
is on Amazon Prime. If you watch
Yeah,
it, you better have speakers you could turn way up.
I think it is also on one of the other, I think Paramount, maybe.
I
Might be
have Paramount. Well, you know what? I think it is here. I can tell you right now. Hold on.
Somebody else
'Cause
has it
if I
as
go
well.
into my Prime Video, Prime Video, I'm scrolling down. Okay, continue watching. Where is it? Stargate SG-1. It just says Prime, included with Prime. So
Maybe it's on one of the other sites like Tubi or something. It's usually how I watch it because I watch it with commercials in it. So
yeah. So on Prime, just forewarning, it's
the volume is really low.
yeah. Oh, hey,
Yeah,
there's a new season of The Night Manager. Yay.
Stargate SG-1, or often abbreviated as SG-1, is a military science fiction adventure television series written by MGM's Stargate franchise, or it's within MGM Stargate franchise. The show was created by Brad Wright and Jonathan Glasner, and it's based on the 1994 science fiction film Stargate by Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich. Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich did Stargate, which was kind of a minor hit for them. But then, like 2 years later, they did ID4 Independence Day, which was a huge hit for them.
I didn't know that Devlin was a part of ID4.
Yeah.
Really?
Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin met on the set of Moon 44.
Huh. Okay.
Which is a film that we have discussed.
Right.
it was like a little underground science fiction film from the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And then they started working together, and then they did Stargate, and then they were all into, sci-fi. Um, Dean Devlin goes on to do a bunch of nerd culture stuff later on.
Oh yeah, Leverage and the Librarians, Paradise, Lost in
Lost in
Paradise,
Paradise.
which I
Yeah.
loved. I'm so sorry that show only made it a couple seasons.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was an excuse for them to go down and hang out in Sabulu.
Yeah, we've talked about that too. I hope somebody else picks that up because I thought that because I know he's shopping it.
Yeah. Well, and also they're having to they're having to work with a production company over in the Philippines and a production company in New Orleans where they're making Leverage, uh
Hmm.
um, revised Leverage. It's the new Leverage.
Redemption.
Redemption. Yeah, Leverage Redemption. Um so I mean, I get, it's like, man, we could kind of put this on hold for a little while. Um The television series was filmed in and around the city of Vancouver, British Columbia. The series premiered on Showtime on July 27th, 1997, and moved to the Sci Fi Channel on June 7th, 2002. The series finale aired on Sky One on March 13th, 2007. So it ran for 10 years. I think they ended up with 11 seasons. The series was a rating success for its first run broadcasters and in syndication, and was particularly popular in Europe and Australia. Stargate's SG-1 awards include 8 Emmy nominations. It also spawned the animated television series Stargate Infinity, the live-action spin-off TV series Stargate Atlantis, Stargate Universe, and Stargate Origins, and the DVD film Stargate: The Ark of Truth and Stargate Continuum. Merchandise for Stargate SG-1 includes games and toys, print media, and original audio series. Um, so Brad Wright and Jonathan Glasner were working on the Outer Limits series, the revitalization of the Outer Limits series, and they were filming up in BC because of a production deal they had in and around Vancouver. They got the idea for making a Stargate series, and they found that um, MGM Television had the rights to do a series, so they approached the heads of the studio to do this series. Um, and they basically followed along. The series picks up a year after the end of the film. Um, it follows the adventures of SG-1, a military team from Earth, and a dozen other SG teams venture to different planets using an alien portal known as the Stargate, which in the series is housed at a top secret United States Air Force military base known as Stargate Command in the underground Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Cheyenne Mountain's a real place. Um, Stargate Command is not. However, there is a broom cupboard to this day in Cheyenne Mountain with a Stargate Command logo on it because they thought it was really funny. Now, all of the scenes that are filmed outside of Cheyenne Mountain, it's the same establishing shot. They basically just shot the front gate and every once in a while they'll update the shots they got for the front gate, and that's then you use that establishing shot, and then you're inside of Stargate Command. Um, the mission of the SG teams is to explore the galaxy and search for alien technology and allies to defend Earth against alien threats such as the Goa'uld, the snake-like parasitic alien race from planet P3X888 that takes humans as unwilling hosts. The replicators and the Ori. As explained in the series' backstory, the Goa'uld had transported human slaves from Earth to other habitable planets across the galaxy thousands of years ago, and now pose as gods of old Earth mythologies, particularly ancient Egypt. The series also draws upon Greek, Roman, and Norse mythology, as well as the legends of King Arthur. SG-1 eventually learns the highly evolved human-like beings known as the Ancients had originally built the Stargate network millions of years earlier before ascending to a higher plane of existence. They also pledged not to interfere in the lives of other species. Brad Wright and Jonathan Glasner, as I said, were working on the Outer Limits. And upon hearing of MGM's plans to create a television spinoff series, they independently, unbeknownst to each other, approached MGM with a concept. MGM President John Sims greenlit the project on the condition that Wright and Glasner work together as executive producers on the new show. The show was named Stargate SG-1 after Wright finally agreed on Sims' pitch question of whether the team should be called SG-1. And MGM released posters titled Stargate SG-1 within the next week without the knowledge of Wright or Glasner. John Sims approached Michael Greenberg and Richard Dean Anderson, former star of the long-running MacGyver. Anderson agreed to become involved if his character Jack O'Neill were allowed a more comedic leeway than Kurt Russell's character in the feature film. He also requested that Stargate SG-1 be an ensemble show so that he would not be carrying most of the plot alone, as he had on MacGyver. The American subscription channel Showtime made a 2-season commitment for 44 episodes in 1996. Principal photography began in Vancouver in February of 97. So they approached Richard Dean Anderson because he was a bit of a name. He had basically just come off of, he did MacGyver, and after MacGyver, he did another series that was failed with the John Delancey of Q fame. That was kind of a steampunk show. It didn't last very long, but it was kind of well loved in geek circles, and it was really big in Canada because, again, most of the stuff is being produced in Canada. Brad White and Jonathan Glasner reviewed several thousand taped auditions and invited approximately 25 promising actors to screen test in Los Angeles. Michael Shanks, Amanda Tapping, and Christopher Judge are said to have gravitated towards each other during the casting process before they knew they would ultimately be cast. The producers found Judge the easiest cast due to his muscular presence. Shanks was cast because he did the perfect imitation of James Spader, according to Wright. The producers knew Don S. Davis from his work as stand-in and stunt double for Dana Elcar in MacGyver and approached him to read the role of George Hammond. So, George Hammond of Texas, because there is a character in the series who is a leader of his people and recognizes Hammond, Don S. Davis, as the leader of his people. So he always refers to him as his title and his place of origin, which is General Hammond of Texas. And it's a recurring theme every time the guy sees him. Hello, General Hammond of Texas. And it's an honorific amongst his people. And you can tell that every time he says it and he bows, it makes Don S. Davis smile. I think it probably cracked him up the first time he heard it because I think he gets the giggles just a little bit. Don S. Davis also famously of Twin Peaks fame. Showtime's announcement that it would not renew Stargate SG-1 after season 5 coincided with Michael Shanks' decision to leave the show over concerns of being underutilized. The Sci-Fi Channel,
not that Michael Shanks.
No, different Michael Shanks.
We've said this before.
Yes.
There you go. Not
Michael Shanks, the Canadian actor, not Michael Shanks, the guy from St. Louis, who we know.
Two Geeks and a Microphone. Listen to him.
Yes.
There you go.
That's 2. The number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah. So the Sci-Fi Channel picked up the show and substituted a new character played by Corin Nimmick. Casting agents had met Nimmick in the courtyard of MGM Santa Monica offices by chance and had offered him the role of Jonas Quinn. Addressing rumors that that it had forced Shank's departure. Sci-Fi said in February of 2002 that the network had absolutely never requested that any cast changes be made. And although we regret the loss of Michael Shanks, we think that Corin Nimmick will be a great new presence in the series. Nimmick's early appearances, beginning with the penultimate episode, season 5's Meridian, failed to win over some of the show's fans. Nimmick was willing to continue playing the character after season 6, or in a feature film or a spin-off series. However, the producers reached an agreement with Shanks to return full-time in season 7, leaving Nimmick with a recurring role. Don S. Davis left Stargate SG-1 after season 7 for health reasons, but appeared in a recurring capacity until his death in June 29th, 2008. Due to prior engagements, Claudia Black of Farscape could not accept the offer to guest star in Stargate SG-1 until season 8 episode Prometheus Unbound. The producers liked the on-screen chemistry between Black's Vala Maldoran and Shanks' Daniels so much that they reintroduced her in a 6-episode story arc to cover for the maternity leave of Amanda Tapping at the beginning of season 9. At the same time, Richard Dean Anderson left the show to spend more time with his daughter. His schedule had been reduced incrementally since season 6. The role of the leading man was filled by Ben Browder, also of Farscape fame, who had met with the Stargate producers as soon as the introduction of new main character for season 9 was discussed. The producers had met with him during sci-fi conventions that had previously discussed casting him on the Stargate roles. The producers approached Emmy Award-winning actor Beau Bridges directly to play the role of Hank Landry. Claudia Black's guest appearances were so popular with the cast and crew and audience that the actress returned for the last 2 seasons, season 9 and season 10, respectively. Most of the producers, crew members, and guest actors involved in Stargate SG-1 were Canadian. Creators Brad Wright and Jonathan Glasner were executive producers and showrunners of Stargate SG-1 in the first 3 seasons, having the final say on stories, design, effects, casting, editing, and episode budgets. After Glasner's departure, Wright ran Stargate SG-1 alone for 3 seasons, and then executive producer Robert C. Cooper took over as showrunner in season 7 when Brad Wright took time off to develop the spin-off series Stargate Atlantis. Cooper and Wright remained showrunners and their respective shows until the end of SG-1. Also serving as executive and co-executive producers were Michael Greenberg and Richard Dean Anderson. I'm sorry, this is a lot of notes, but it's kind of important on the production of it. Richard Dean Anderson and Greenberg were producers season 1 through 8. John Smith for seasons 4 to 10, and writing team of Joseph Malazzoli, Min Kwok, and Polly Mully. Season 7 through 10. Although Stargate SG-1 employed freelance writers, most of the 214 Stargate SG-1 episodes were written by Brad Wright, seasons 1 through 10, and Jonathan Glasner, seasons 1 through 3. Catherine Powers, Robert C. Cooper, Peter DeLuise, Damian Kendler, Alan McCullough, Mazzoli and Mully, Martin Wood, and Peter DeLuise. Wood and DeLuise regularly made cameo appearances in their episodes and notably played the show within a show director in the cameo-heavy milestone episodes Wormhole, Extreme, and 200. Andy Makita had been an assistant director since the pilot episode and directed 29 episodes from season 3 to 10. So to say this is basically a family affair. This connected production company, they try to keep everything as in-house as possible. Keeping in mind, this series ran for 10 years. Richard Dean Anderson was main cast and then a guest appearance for 9 of the seasons. Michael Shanks was on for 9 of the seasons. Christopher Judge and Amanda Tapping playing Samantha Carter and Teal'c were the only 2 people who ran through the whole series. Don S. Davis came back. Jonas Quinn, Corin Nimmick was in for like 3 seasons. Ben Browder was there for, I believe, 2 seasons. Beau Bridges was there for 2 or 3 seasons. Claudia Black was there for 3 seasons. As well as Lexa Doog, who played Hank Landry's daughter and the base command's physician after Terry. Oh my God, I didn't put her name, but the physician for the first through 9 seasons, she was basically a recurring character, but she was so popular they kept bringing her back in every episode. She actually gets killed in the series um, because she got tired of doing it, and then so they brought Alexa Doog in as actually a starring member. Um, it's amazing is they actually go through a different they go to a different dimension and they find the other doctor and bring her back, so she actually the character gets to live. Um, but so this was a big production company and a big production studio. But what's great is once they built, just like in Firefly, once they built the sets, other than the establishing shots they had to go to Cheyenne Mountain for, which was, a day of shooting every couple of years, um, they didn't have to build it again, right? So the Stargate that you see, there is a there's a Stargate model that is in the main set, and then they have a location Stargate model which they use everywhere else. Right? They don't use the same model, and it's a little smaller because they have to transport it. But basically, they made it like Lego so they could put it together and take it apart. And since it's gonna the secondary Stargate is going to represent different locations, they made it so they could take pieces off and put pieces on, so it looked different. But it's basically the same piece of set that they just carried out to where they were going and filmed it. And they also use the same locations a lot, in and around Vancouver, because there's a lot of forest out there. There's a lot of empty space where they can film. Um, Amanda Tapping and Christopher Judge being brought on as two incidental characters, because I said earlier, Richard Dean Anderson wanted to not carry the whole show by himself like he had to in MacGyver. And then he did that other show with John Delancey where he got to play off John Delancey a lot. So he wasn't carrying the show by himself. He really liked that. So he wanted, an expanded cast. And Glasner and Wright were already thinking in those terms, because it doesn't need to just be, if it was just O'Neill and Daniel Jackson, it wouldn't be as interesting. So they brought in a Jaffa and astrophysicist to round it out. The astrophysicist, captain, commander, and then eventually colonel um, Carter, um, as two other characters to kind of play this role off. And what was great is everybody had their role, and this show just ran. It was greatness, because you had different people, and at some point they would leave for a little while and go to Atlantis, or they would go on some of the ships that got built because they eventually figured out how to build ships. Um, I'll give you some of the background. So the original film ends, Daniel Jackson stays on Abydos, and they basically don't so much blow up the gate, but collapse it, right? And it's a year later, and someone tries to come through the Stargate from the other side. They're thinking they're coming from Abydos, because basically the Stargate got shuttered because they thought the other gate had been closed down. What they didn't realize is there were other gates involved. There's an entire network of gates. And these people came through uh, basically to conquer this new area. So what it is the Unis creatures that we see at the very end of the Stargate film. We actually see what Ra looks like underneath his mask, what the alien looked like. That alien was not who was in control. That alien was actually a different semi-intelligent species. Almost, they were like cavemen, but they came into contact with these snake-like creatures that either go in through your mouth or the back of your neck, and they take control of you. They took control of these Unis creatures, and once they discovered the technology that the ancients had left, they developed it on their own and had a readily available slave class. Because Ra was the first one to do it. He came to Earth, grabbed a whole bunch of people, and deposited them on different planets so they could become his slave labor. The alien that took over Ra was not the Unis. The Unis died. It was the snake that was inside the Unis's body that took over the poor Egyptian man who became Ra. So they control an army by or slave labor by becoming godlike. One of the things that being taken over by the Goa'uld, the snake creatures, is that they have the element that they use to power all of the devices is called naquita. They have it in their bloodstream. It generates power on its own. So when you are taken over by one of those things, one of the things that happens to you is occasionally your eyes glow. Like the whites of your eyes become lights. Which to less developed people appears to be a godlike quality. So it's kind of how they kept them in check. The problem is the snake-like creatures, they develop basically in pools, right? Once they get to a certain age, they take them out of the pools and put them in the stomach of these people called Jaffa. And the adolescent Goa'uld learns how to control people by living inside the Jaffa. Now, the Jaffa has complete control of itself until the Goa'uld becomes an adult. But the juvenile Goa'uld allows the Jaffa to have an extraordinarily long life. They have an immune system that is basically supercharged, so they don't ever get sick. They heal faster from injuries. The problem is that once they've been joined with a juvenile Goa'uld, if they ever take it out, they'll die. Once the juvenile reaches a certain age, it is taken out and put into the body of a chosen slave. What they'll do is they'll grab a bunch of slaves and pick the one that's the prettiest or the most, because the Goa'uld are they're like the Tavs in Larry Niven's The World of the Tavs and the Ring World. They have an innate ability to control other people, but they're not necessarily hyper intelligent. They're very petty because they don't need to be smart because they can control smart people. So they're kind of dumb and petty, which is also why they're always hell-bent on conquest, which is also why none of them can ever take over the galaxy, because they're all fighting each other. Because these full-grown Goa'uld are what is known as system lords, and they control different regions of space with different isolated populations of slave labor. In some cases, on some of the planets, because there's thousands of these gates all over in this network, in some of these planets, they've thrown the gold off and think of the Stargate as a relic like we did. And in some cases, they cast off the Goa'uld and started using the Stargate for trade with other planets, the network, because some of the system lords Once they get killed by another one, the knowledge of all of their gates goes away because nobody really has an accurate map of all of the Stargate network on their own, which is what Stargate SG-1 is deemed to try to control and get. One of the one of the Jaffa, which is the people who walk around, they're the ones with the metal heads. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they're the army of the Goa'uld. One of them joins SG-1 because there is a resistance movement within the Jaffa ranks that's been going on for thousands of years. He ends up joining SG-1 as a member because he has more knowledge of different system lords and things like that because he's been fighting them most of his life. That's Teal'c, played by Christopher Judge. Of course, he's got the juvenile Goa'uld in his gut, which makes him not so much faster and stronger, but tougher. Like he can recover from stuff a lot quicker than anybody else can.
Well, I know who you're talking about. He's a physically imposing character.
Yes. Yeah, and but he's a Jaffa. Eventually the resistance movement in the Jaffa finally rises up to help them defeat the rest of the Goa'uld and the System Lords. But the System Lords are very powerful, but again, they're so fucking petty that's eventually their undoing. they're just they're pieces of shit. So that's kind of how they end up beating them. And again, there's other planets where they just overthrew them thousands of years ago, and they don't deal with them because that whatever system lord was controlling that area died. So it's about that connecting, and Daniel Jackson has to be along with them because he is a linguist. They kind of dispense with that fairly early on. It's like they go to a different planet, and it's like, well, everybody basically can speak. So they kind of downplay the fact that Daniel Jackson's there because he figures out how to speak to them. They don't really show that after like episode 2 or 3. We just assume that's happened. He's essentially a living universal translator. But you get a lot of the Goa'uld, system lords stabbing each other in the back, making deals with SG-1 and then screwing them over and then getting screwed over by another system lord. There's a lot of that going on. So it's a big adventure show. The system lords also have spaceships, which are pyramids, which land on top of pyramids in Giza and in different parts. They can also just sit on the ground too. But SG-1 is able to get some of that technology from them, reverse engineer it, and make some spaceships of our own. So there's the Daedalus and some of the others. In later seasons, we have faster than light travel. It is still heavily controlled by the military, and they don't let everybody know that we have Stargates and faster than light travel and all this other shit because they think it's going to freak everybody out. I think eventually they do come to the point that everybody on Earth gets told, hey, we can go to different planets now. Things are better. They also set up what they call alpha and beta sites, whereas because they know the Goa'uld system lords can basically come in and destroy Earth, they set up different colonies set up by the U.S. military and eventually the Russian military, and eventually it is controlled by a UN organization to send people to those different places so human race can't be wiped out. But human beings actually populated all over space because thousands of years ago the Goa'uld used them as slaves. and you actually get in a couple of cases you get like you when the Goa'uld dies, because they do eventually die. Um, like the humans get to become human again. Um, and there's this Goa'uld who is really fucking evil. The Goa'uld dies, and the human who he's been controlling for 5,000 years wakes up and is freaking the fuck out because he was there. He understood what was going on. There was another faction of Goa'uld who believe that the System Lords are evil and they don't control their human being. They live with them like a Trill in Star Trek. They're called the Tok'ra. The Tok'ra are also they befriend the SG-1 and work with them, as well as the Tolan, which was a group of human beings that overthrew the Goa'uld thousands of years ago and kept going and developed the technology, and they're very technologically advanced. There are other species other than the Goa'uld, other alien species as well that they interact with. The Asgard, which are from Norse mythology, they're actually Greys. And
The Asgardians are little Greys.
yeah, they're Greys.
That's funny.
Yeah, and they're all voiced by Michael Shanks, by the way. Not our Michael Shanks,
Not
the
our
Canadian
Michael Shanks,
Michael.
right?
He's
So,
Canadian Michael
Two
Shanks.
Geeks and a Microphone. That's the number 2. Listen to them.
Number 2. But yeah, so you've got this going on. You've got all these factions. You've got these giant pyramid ships. It is an adventure of the week kind of story because they have a Stargate. So why not do an adventure of the week? But eventually, it spawns off into several other series that you get to explore. Eventually, they go and find a city that the ancients had built, the last city of the ancients. The ancients, which are basically human beings, millions of years ago, they were from a different galaxy. They came here and populated it. They went to the Pegasus galaxy and populated it and caused problems there as well. But there is one section of the ancients who figured that they could ascend to a higher plane of existence, but also control everything that's going on around them. So they become a religious community called the Ori. That is what the last couple of seasons are involved taking on. And the Ori are fucking evil. Just evil, and it's not because they're petty and selfish like the Goa'uld, but kind of dumb. The Ori are exceedingly intelligent. They're semi-ascended beings, and they want to control everyone because they think that if people are praying to them, it gives them strength. They're pretty fucking nasty, and they've got a whole galaxy behind them. They built a giant Stargate in space. I wasn't real crazy about the Ori storyline because it felt like the show was starting to run out of steam by that point. This is also when they bring in Claudia Black, and Marina Baccarat is a character in it, as well as Ben Browder. It wasn't bad. Honestly, it was better than a lot of other stuff I'd seen, but it didn't have the punch that the first couple of seasons of Stargate SG-1 had. Even when they brought in Cora Nimick, all of that stuff was fucking fascinating. And they brought Daniel Jackson back because what happened was Daniel Jackson ascended to the other plane of existence, and because he kept meddling, he got sent back. And yeah, Michael Shanks' Daniel Jackson was fantastic. Well, again, Canadian Michael Shanks, not our Michael Shanks. Two geeks and a microphone. I'm kind of nerding out about this a little bit. Don S. Davis was great, but then again, so was Beau Bridges. I liked all of the characterizations because they got to play a little bit There was fun, there's humor, there's action. Is some of it hokey? Yes. Yes. It's an adventure sci-fi science fiction show. It's supposed to be a little hokey sometimes. But you could tell there was a lot of fun, there was a lot of play between the people. I really enjoyed it. Um, there's a lot of errata that goes on. It's one of those things you just need to sit down and buckle up and watch. Yes, they have over 200 episodes, but because they were originally on Showtime, it wasn't a 20 episode order. It was like 15, you know? So it's not as severe, but because they went on 10 years, you're going to get up, I think it's like 210 episodes, 220 maybe. When Sci-Fi took over, there was definitely you could tell they spent a little less money on production or physical production. They did a little more CGI stuff. But it's not that obvious. I only noticed it on subsequent watchings because, it's one of those shows I could just watch. But yeah, I like Stargate SG-1. I always thought it was great. The first couple of seasons being the best. Because they had the original idea, but it even in later iterations, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't as good, if that makes sense.
And I may try to watch it on my primary TV in the living room because where I tried to watch it was here on my computer. And I don't have external speakers or anything. I'm using just the built-in speakers of my monitor.
Oh, yeah, that's probably it.
But it was still really, really low. I watched all kinds of things on my computer here in my office.
The audio quality, even when they were producing it, was not.
Yeah.
Great.
I may see if I can watch it on another TV and see if I can get some better sound with it.
Almost like when they were recording it, they recorded it lower. Except the opening theme song, which was louder.
I did want to say that as we were going here, I did let Michael Shanks from Two Geeks and a Microphone. That'll be 5, by the way.
Two Geeks and a Microphone.
That's kind of sick. That it's been kind of the Michael Shanks drinking game on the show today. And that they got a whole lot of free press. But yeah, I do want to give it a watch. I know I'm almost positive Chelsea has watched all of this series. I remember she was watching it, I think Atlantis at one point. Doesn't Atlantis have what's his name? Lie to me. Lie to me actor. Cal Lightman. Eli Dadgummit. 4 Rooms. The bellhop from 4 Rooms.
Oh, Tim
Roth. I kept wanting to say.
Tim Roth's in Atlantis.
Who was that then that I was
thinking? In Stargate Universe, you had Begbie, Robert.
Is that who I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm almost positive she was watching that at one time. God, I kept wanting to say Eli Roth. I knew that wasn't right. Tim Roth. But yeah, I think it's something I need to watch. So get out there and watch it. I'll try it on another medium besides my computer, see if I get some better sound. But great stuff. Good stuff.
Well, thanks, sir.
With that, we'll step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off Wikipedia, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette.
Robert Carlyle.
Robert Carlyle, thank you. I don't know why I sometimes confuse him for Tim Roth. I know I do. That's not the first time I've done that, too. Is there a reason? Is there a reason I'm doing that? I don't know.
They're both English.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I need to figure that out. The Arkansas Democrat Gazette, AP News, Arkansas Department of Corrections, Murderpedia, and Crime Library. That's right. We are going into our ongoing A to Z journey walk across America's serial killers, state by state, case by case. Not to rank violence, not to chase notoriety, but to understand how these stories begin, how they're missed, and how they're finally recognized for what they are. How about that?
Very nice.
So we started in Alaska, where geography and isolation shape both crime and the investigation. We moved through Alabama, where ideology turned belief into violence. And then last time we passed through Arizona, where silence and time delayed justice for decades. Today's letter takes us to Arkansas. And in Arkansas, this is going to bring us to a different kind of story, not one defined by scale or marked by panic or immediate fear, but one that was shaped by who was seen and who wasn't. This is a case where deaths were questioned, then dismissed. Patterns existed but weren't pursued, and where it took far too long for anyone to say what was happening out loud. So this is the story of Charles Ray Hatcher, and this is Arkansas.
Charles Ray Hatcher.
So in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Arkansas was not a state gripped by fear of a serial killer, kind of like Arizona was in our last one. No task forces, no public warnings, no sense of a pattern of lethal violence that was unfolding, again, just like Arizona. Arkansas was in that era that was still operating with investigative tools that would assume proximity. Crimes were expected to stay local, patterns were expected to announce themselves quickly. Again, this is an era where information did not move easily between counties. Databases were limited. Record keeping was often physical, not digital. And unless the suspect was already known, evidence could sit dormant for years without direction. Very similar to last week.
Mm-hmm.
In that type of environment, violence didn't need to go sophisticated to go undetected. It just needed to be spaced out. And this is what gave Hatcher exactly what he needed: time. The deaths that would eventually be connected to Charles Ray Hatcher did not arrive all at once. They appeared individually, quietly, and separated by time, circumstance, and perception. Before these deaths became files and case numbers, they were lives already in motion. They belonged to women who woke up that day expecting continuity and expecting routine and expecting to be seen. They had family, they had histories, and they had people who would notice their absence long before any investigator ever did. However, in cases like this, the system doesn't meet the victim where they lived. It meets them where they were found. And when deaths arrive quietly without spectacle, witnesses, or immediate certainty, they are easier to misclassify. They're easier to explain away and easier to remain unsolved. Doesn't happen because the victims matter less. It's because the warning signs arrived loudly enough to demand attention. And by the time those signs were finally recognized, the opportunity to intervene had already passed. Some of these were ruled suspicious but inconclusive, were initially treated as accidents, and some were simply filed away without the urgency typically reserved for cases that demand attention. This matters because serial killers are often identified not just by what they do, but by how quickly the system reacts to their victims. You're going to see this time and again as we go through this. In Arkansas, reactions were slow. The victims were not people whose deaths triggered alarms. They lived in margins. This is different from our last one. They move through spaces that rarely make headlines, and because of that, their deaths did not immediately raise the question that should have been asked: is this random or is this repetition? By the time that question finally surfaced, it was already too late for several people, and the pattern, once seen, could no longer be ignored. The earliest deaths connected to Charles Ray Hatcher did not arrive with certainty. They arrived with questions. In 1990, the body of Chapin was discovered in Arkansas. She was found floating in a river, and her death was initially treated as suspicious but inconclusive. She wasn't a headline. She was a person with a ladder long before she became a case file, someone who was missed immediately, not just identified later, and that's what often gets lost when a death is labeled inconclusive. People who love them don't think it's inconclusive. They just feel like the world says, whatever. And the fact that it was in a river, it gave investigators fewer answers that they needed, but it gave her family one of those silences they never asked for. There were signs that suggested something was wrong. There were injuries that didn't fully align with an accident, and the circumstances that raised concern without providing clarity. But without a witness, a clear cause, and a suspect, the case stalled, not because investigators didn't care, but once again, because evidence didn't force their hand. For investigators, those inconsistencies are troubling, but they're not actionable. Suspicion without proof is not enough to move a case forward, which is where these go cold. For Lena's family, they weren't working within the standards of evidence or prosecutorial threshold. They were living with the knowledge that something about her death didn't make sense and that no one could tell them why. This is where I talked about when a case stalls very early, the case doesn't end. It just kind of it calcifies, leads dry up, and witnesses' memories fade. The burden quietly shifts from the system to the family to keep it going, to remember, to ask, to wait. And this is where the absence of certainty becomes its own conclusion. And so this death was left unresolved. A few years later, another woman died. This time the death appeared more straightforward. In 1992, Robin Bishop was found dead, and the circumstances surrounding her death were initially ruled an accident. And there was no immediate reason to believe otherwise. There was no obvious trauma and no immediate red flags that demanded an escalation. Um, accident is a word that kind of finalizes things. This is where it closes doors and lowers urgency, and it basically tells everyone there's nothing more to be seen here. Families don't experience that sense of closure. They kind of feel it as a verdict that is delivered at that point. An accidental ruling doesn't end the investigation; it just reframes the death entirely. But once that label is applied, follow-up becomes optional instead of urgent. Re-examination of evidence becomes unlikely instead of expected, and the assumption settles in that nothing more needs to be done. In Robin's case, that assumption held, not because questions didn't exist, but because no one was yet prepared to ask the question, whether the questions belonged to something larger. If this wasn't an accident, the question really they're asking, if this wasn't an accident, why doesn't the story feel complete? Robin deserved more than a quick conclusion. She deserved a full one, but context was what was not visible. These women didn't know each other. They didn't die in the same way. They weren't found in the same location. And that's where separation matters, because serial patterns are often identified through repetition that is obvious. Same method, same location, same timing. Wow, this is a lot like Arizona was.
Mm-hmm.
What Hatcher left behind instead were isolated events. There was each one was capable of standing on alone that made no one look any harder, and no one did. Not yet, at any rate. There was no reason to connect the deaths. They happened years apart, and they were being investigated by different people at different times. But over time, something began to feel off on this. These women, they shared more than geography. They shared vulnerability. They were not women. They were women whose lives did not come with built-in advocates. It did not immediately trigger attention. These were women whose stories were easier to just kind of set aside. And this is where the case becomes less about individual instance, more about resistance. And that was resistance that these deaths might be connected. It was resistance to reopening files that had been closed because they had been deemed accidents. And it also became resistant to admitting conclusions might have been incomplete. Serial killers are often identified when investigators connect cases. Here, there was no event that forced that. There was no public panic, no sudden spike, and no third crime that demanded a second look. So each case lived on its own, and there was just enough uncertainty that they remained isolated. And as long as they could be explained as accidents, there was nothing that made someone see them together. For much of this time, Charles Ray Hatcher, just like our Arizona case, lived a life that didn't attract attention. He moved through Arkansas without distinction. He worked, he socialized, he formed relationships, and there was nothing about him which marked him as a threat. And this is what matters, because serial offenders who blend in don't rely on secrecy alone. They rely on assumptions. The assumption that danger looks a certain way and that violence escalates quickly, and the assumption that if something truly bad were happening would already be obvious. Hatcher did not fit the image people expected, and because of that, he was not a focus until he chose to be. In 1997, he attacked Shirley Banks, but this time the outcome was different. Shirley survived. Her survival changed the trajectory of everything. Shirley didn't just survive the attack. She survived the aftermath, the reporting, the questions, the pressure, and the knowledge that her words might be the only thing to pull these stories into the light. Because she lived, she did what the two victims could not. She could name him. She was able to identify Hatcher and describe the assault, and she was able to clearly and without ambiguity describe what happened. So for the first time, they had a living witness, and now this uncertainty was fading. Hatcher was arrested and he was charged with rape. And once in custody, investigators began to look backwards, and that's when those earlier deaths resurfaced. They reopened files, and the details were reconsidered. Once Charles Ray Hatcher was in custody for the assault on Shirley Bank, everything stopped being buried. Investigators returned to earlier cases with a different question in mind, not what happened, but who had access. And this is when what was once inclusive kind of began to line up. Timelines were revisited and relationships were re-examined, and circumstances that now seemed isolated now shared contact. And this is where it's one of the most difficult moments in an investigation, because when you reopen a case, you have to acknowledge that earlier conclusions may be incomplete and that opportunities were missed. And it means that confronting the reality that time didn't just pass, it protected somebody, in this case, Hatcher. It's not just about pulling files off the shelf. You have to reassign resources, re-interview people who believe that they were all done with this, and going back to families and making them relive the grief they had already been told is resolved. It takes a lot of humility for the police to say we might have missed something, and that doesn't come easily, but without saying that, patterns stay buried. In this case, the protection was unintentional, but the results were the same. As investigators worked backwards, they found that Hatcher had known or interacted with multiple women whose deaths had once been considered unrelated. And so the pattern was no longer theoretical, it was relational. His proximity victims became difficult to ignore. So did the circumstances surrounding their death. And so it was no longer now a coincidence, and it felt consistent. With Shirley Banks' testimony now bringing everything to the present, the past could finally be reexamined. So Hatcher was charged not only with the assault that was brought to light, but for earlier crimes as well. The legal process unfolded very slowly and deliberately because, as we talked about last week, prosecutors understood the stakes. They were not cases built on fresh evidence or immediate memory. They were built on reconstruction and context, and they had to be able to be willing to admit that the earlier silence had allowed something very dangerous to keep going. Charges did reflect the full scope of what investigators now believe had happened, and for the first time, Arkansas was forced to confront the truth it had not previously acknowledged. This had not been random. Charles Ray Hatcher was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families of the victims, it didn't restore what was taken, of course, and it didn't rewind time, but it did give justice and made that pattern finally be seen. Charles Ray Hatcher's story is not just about violence. It's really about recognizing things, about which deaths are treated as emergencies and which are allowed to drift into uncertainty, and then how long it takes for the system to admit that something doesn't add up. This is one of those cases that force uncomfortable questions, not about guilt, because that was ultimately decided, but about timing. It begs the question, how many signs have to appear before someone insists on connecting them, and how many questions have to remain unanswered before the silence stops being acceptable? So as we keep going on this A to Z journey across America's serial killers, Arkansas is going to stand as a reminder that patterns don't always fail because they're not there. Sometimes they fail because no one's looking in the right direction. Charles Ray Hatcher did not rely on chaos or spectacle. He relied on hesitation and uncertainty, and on the belief that isolated cases would remain isolated, and for years they did. When that pattern was finally seen, it changed everything, but unfortunately, after lives have already been lost. It doesn't make this story about hindsight, but it does make the story about attention and why where we choose to focus, it matters. And that's the story of Charles Ray Hatcher.
Well, thank you, sir. I was looking up pictures of him, and apparently there's 2 serial killers named Charles Ray Hatcher.
There are. Yes, there are.
That's so freaky.
Yes. Yes, there are.
Wow.
Well, I was well aware of that one. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay. All right.
So that's it for my story for this week, and that will take us to the end of yet another week of Nerdery and Murdery. We appreciate all of you for staying around through us for all of this. You can find more about us on our website, nerderymurdery.com, links, pictures, as well as the link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often updates.
Yeah, go check out the YouTube page. I've actually got, I think the pilots, I've got the whole thing on there, as well as a whole bunch of scenes from different seasons. So you kind of see some of the different characters that come in and out.
Awesome. Appreciate all your work on that.
Thanks, sir.
You can also find the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery Murdery fandom, please do consider something from there. And let's face it, let's be honest about it. You look damn good in it.
Damn good.
Damn good. You'll also find the link to our Patreon account if you wish to become a patron. That, along with our merchandise, do help with the costs that are associated with this show. It does cost to keep us on the air for our storage, for our uploads, and everything that goes into this show. It's not cheap, it's not free, and we do appreciate each and every one of you.
Please and thank you.
Another thing you can do that is completely free, though, is leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the information we discuss. And please do follow us on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok. Those really help with the algorithms as well and help people find us and raise our name up to the top. That's as another thing that is completely free to you, and there's some extra stuff you'll see on that. Oh, and I'm back up just a little bit because I meant to mention this a couple of episodes ago, but our Patreon, you also get exclusive episodes that are not available anywhere else. You can only get them through our Patreon account. As of this recording, I believe we have 28 exclusives out there.
Yep, 28 of them.
So if you are just not getting enough Nerdery Murdery in your life, please do consider that, because there's 28 extra episodes sitting there for you right now. And last, but certainly not least, to our good friend Chuck. You can go to sleep now.
Good night, Chuck.
Good night, Chuck. Oh, and also Michael Shank, 2 Geeks and Mike From. There's 7. With that.
Good night, Mike. I have been Zig with your Nerdery.
I'm Jeffrey with your Murdery.
Cue the music.
Collide, fascination can